live in a minute. Yep, I'm live now. Okay.
Okay. Tell me, but I'll text you if I still hear it, okay? And I'll let them know. I'll let them know. All right.
All right.
So have a great show.
Right. Thank
Good morning,
you,
Ted.
Okay.
Have a good show.
I'm gonna let all of you go so I can get on with this. Get on. Thank you for everything.
You're welcome.
Thank you for everything.
You're welcome.
Okay.
You're welcome. Anytime. I got you. Okay.
Thank you, Maria. We're gonna let you go. All right. So, Pastor Brooks, how are you?
Mexican authorities.
I am great. Awesome. How are you?
Good. Doing great. Just trying to get the last minute.
June 6th elections. Alma Barragan was killed Tuesday while campaigning for the mayorship of the city of Moroleon in violence-plagued Guanajuato State. Mexico's president said Wednesday the killing was without doubt the work of organized crime gangs. Observers say Mexican drug gangs want to place sympathetic candidates in town halls and city governments so they can operate without police interference. I'm Mike Rossi.
Ford says it expects 40% of its sales to be electric by 2030. Ford has been criticized for moving too slowly on its turnaround and on its future vehicle plans. But those plans are speeding up now under the new CEO, Jim Farley. I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
Okay, honey, just trying to get all these little pieces together. Darius. Okay. Remember, it is. And so you're gonna speak with who's it with? You spoke with Shelley.
Shelley.
Okay, what is he trying to? Can you bring that down?
Right. Yeah. That's what he said. He says he's going to try to make arrangements for me to come down and just everything.
What did you need me to bring down?
That was like loud, huge, very, very loud.
What was?
What I'm hearing from the station.
I'm not sending anything to you.
It's coming to me. I don't know where that's coming from. I know you've got a lot on you right now, but I'm getting something from the station. It was very, very loud. That music that we played during traffic.
Okay.
That's what came through. Okay. So you might not be sending something, but it's coming.
Are you still getting it?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So just wanted you to know that. Because I could. And do we still have Tom or anyone? No. Okay. All right, everybody. So Darius, by 6:19 you should be done. Okay.
You got it.
Or 6:20 on the outside. Okay. So thank you very much. Yeah. Trying to make the show tighter. Right. Okay, so got that. Okay, great. Whew. Okay, good. All right. So let me know what's going on, because I didn't know you had spoken with until I got your message. I didn't know you'd spoken with Shelley.
I'm 15.
Call me today by noon.
Okay. Okay, well, let me know.
Regardless, we can still get together for the song. Yeah.
Just let me know. Okay.
10.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Barbara Jean, Samantha.
5.
Jewel. We're coming up.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Yes, we are, everybody. We are victorious. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820. 920, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and all over the country, all over the world. I want you to meet my morning stars, the Santita Jackson Morning Stars, over on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We have a lot of great conversation that we have that's stirred up during the show. And of course, call me or text me at 773 763 9278 773 763 9278. That's 773-763-WCPT. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text, and we want to hear from you, everybody. We have a lot to talk about today. Inflation, housing is increasingly unaffordable, and certainly home ownership is out of reach. Um, more and more Americans, if not an outright majority, are not able to achieve that American dream and buy the house. What is this? Going to the grocery store, the prices are skyrocketing, but your wages are not moving. We're talking about people who are not going back to work, and it's like it's a little bit deeper than folks not wanting to go back to work. There is what do they say? The U.S. labor shortage is a wage shortage, not a labor shortage. How about that? We're going to be talking with Dr. Max Wolf about that. We're going to talk with Jonathan Jackson about HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. They've been getting a lot of attention lately. Of course, our vice president went to Howard, as did I. And of course, the new senator from Georgia, Senator Raphael Warnock, Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, is a Morehouse man. And on and on and on. These black colleges continue to produce people who have an outsized imprint on our culture, on the society, on our government, on every aspect of American life. Big chunk of our engineers, our professionals come out of these black colleges, and yet it is much harder for them to get loans and to achieve financial stability. And there's a study that shows that racism is driving that. We've got to talk about that. And then we're going to be talking about diabetes, sugar, something that our grandparents used to talk about, sugar in your blood. Well, it turns out 500 million people on earth, 500 million have it, and it's going up in the global south, in these poor brown and black countries. Why? And most people who have it don't know it. Think about that. And diabetes, if it's untreated, it's not a good thing. We're going to talk about that. Where is this coming from? And what can we do about it? Are you in the number? Do you have diabetes and not know it? Because that can happen to a lot of people, everybody. So we've got a lot to talk about on Thursday, May 27th, 2021. Boy, oh boy, what a joy it is to be with you today. And let's get to some of these headlines, Paul. Chicago is going to be a high of 59 degrees today. Rain. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 51 degrees. Rain. On the stock markets, the Dow was up 10 points. The NASDAQ closed up 80 points. The S&P 500 closed up 7 points. And in Major League Baseball, well, today the Cubs will be playing the Pirates, and the Cardinals bested the White Sox 4-0, and they'll be playing them again tonight. And the Twins are triumphant over the Orioles 3-2. Well, we are in the throes of the NBA playoff season. The Wizards, well, they fell to the 76ers. 76ers won 20. Wizards 95. Knicks 101. Boy, they're having a great season. Hawks 92. The Grizzlies, they fell to the Jazz. Jazz 141. The Grizzlies 129. High-scoring games. The Bucks will be playing the Heat today. The Suns will be facing off against the Lakers. Nuggets against the Trailblazers. The Nets versus the Celtics. It is going to be something special, everybody. Looking at these. Sports are back. It's unbelievable. Well, our prayers are going out to our brothers and sisters in San Jose. Linear Bob, thinking about you today. 9 people are dead after a gunman opened fire. And essential work, everybody, at the Valley Transportation Authority light rail yard in San Jose, California yesterday. The shooter, a VTA employee, is also dead, and the police believe that he committed suicide. The shooting happened as the night and morning shifts overlapped and rail activity was starting up for the day. No motive has been released, but San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo said the victims, quote, and all the colleagues knew the shooter well. How tragic, everybody. This is not the first time the pandemic has seen essential workers have been at the center of such a tragedy. Indianapolis, the FedEx facility, in March, the Colorado grocery store, sending much love and many blessings to everybody. President Biden has asked the U.S. intelligence community to double down on efforts to investigate the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic in Wuhan and report back to him in 90 days. It's important to note that this is an intelligence operation, not a scientific inquiry. What is that about? And it's not clear how many answers the intelligence community will be able to land amid complex science and China's general secrecy on the matter, everybody. The Biden administration and Democrats in Congress are facing increased pressure from black civil rights leaders to make headway on some sort of police reform legislation. Of course, the president wanted the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to be passed a couple of days ago on the first anniversary of the killing of George Floyd. That did not happen. Will it go forward? Well, we will have to see. In the meantime, a court in the Netherlands ordered Royal Dutch Shell, this is big, everybody, yesterday to slash emissions faster and harder than they planned. Investors in ExxonMobil won 2 board seats and promised to push the energy giant to diversify beyond oil and fight climate change, everybody. Whoa, once limited to protesting outside, now they are on the board. What do you think about that, everybody? Google has struck a deal with a hospital chain to develop healthcare algorithms. Do you feel comfortable with that? Well, you know what? Elizabeth Warren, she just keeps on going, everybody. The Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs held a virtual hearing, and she and Jamie Dimon went at it. Wow. While questioning the Chase CEO, Warren, the Democrat from Massachusetts, took aim at Wells Fargo, Citi, and the Bank of America. She contrasted generous pandemic-era policies of bank regulators with those that banks had for their customers, and millions of people struggled with the economic consequences of the public health crisis. She said, why are you charging people these overdraft fees during the pandemic? And they went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's incredible, everybody. And guess what? We're going to just see just how all of this goes, everybody. There's a whole lot going on. Reverend Darius Brooks, Pastor Darius Brooks of the Grace Central Church here in Chicago, you got to give us some good news today.
Santita, I am so honored to give you some good news today. In Deuteronomy 11:25 is one of my favorite scriptures, 11:25-28. He says, there shall no man be able to stand before you, for the Lord your God shall lay the fear of you and the dread of you upon all the land that ye shall tread upon, my God, as he hath said unto you. Check this out, Santita. Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. I'm about to run up out of here, girl. Blessing is you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, and a curse if you will not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside unto the way which I command you this day, to go after other gods which ye have not known. And he's basically saying at this point that he's already got some things set. My God, I'm about to run out of here. And there's a blessing in obeying God. Watch this, for your life, for my life as individuals. There's blessings in it, and there's other situations that's not so good that I call blessings. Santita, if I had to use a thought today, I'd use the thought, God keep us or me good. Santita, check this out. After I hear people say, God is good, but Santita, God ain't good. God is God, particularly because each day brings on a different experience. When he says this day, like today, or Thursday, the 26th, he is saying the choice you made through me on Monday took care of Tuesday. The choice you made through me on Tuesday took care of Wednesday. And Wednesday's choice you made through me on yesterday takes care of today, Thursday. My God, Santita. And I have some other things on tomorrow, Friday, and in the future that's already planned that cannot be controlled with your hands. Some crazy, amazing blessings and some other stuff that's going to be a little bit different. Yet I have steps for you to take that's going to take real good care of them all and you. Say, self, God is not good. God is God. When we try, Santita, to use exclamations, God has already placed exclamations. And Santita, I got to run on and close with this. But Santita, when you and I, or who's ever under the sound of my voice, keep God God, He will be the God in our lives that keeps us good. We'll know when to hold. We'll know when to fold. We'll know when to move. We'll know when to groove. We'll know when to walk. We'll know when to talk. He won't let us deal with no wet wood, Santita. God ain't good. God is God. And in a mess age, He sends a message that won't let us deal with no wet wood. But obeying Him, God will keep us good.
Oh, I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Message in the mess age. Boy, there's a lot going on. There is a lot going on. And I thank you, no, seriously, I thank you for that because you break it down and you make it so accessible. You make it so accessible.
It's doable. It's some things He did not put in our hands, and they already worked out. All we got to do is do our little part, but don't fret. Don't worry about it. Just do what we're supposed to do. It's already worked out.
I guess you have to have faith to make it happen, huh?
No, it's not an option. That's not an option.
Okay.
He says without faith, it's impossible to please God. And He's a rewarder to them that diligently seek Him. Martin Luther King has faith in Jesus. Santita Jackson has faith. Jesse Jackson Sr. has faith. All the things He's done, that's faith. And people of God, we got to have the same faith. You know God got an exclamation at the end of this thing. He's God. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein. We just got to obey His word for our personal lives and then take the steps to do the things we need to do for other stuff. And He's going to orchestrate events to move us in His will.
Pastor Darius Brooks, a Great Central Church here in Chicago. How can we hear you very quickly?
GreatCentral.net. On Sunday mornings, we are open 10:30 till noon. On Tuesdays, Great Central, go to Great Central YouTube channel, and you can get all of these messages. One in particular, Santita, I thought, whoever said love hurts lies. You got to get that message.
I love it. GreatCentral.net.
Whoever said love hurts.
They lied.
They lied.
I love you, Pastor Brooks, Pastor Darius Brooks. Yes, that Darius Brooks, the brilliant psalmist and songwriter. We love him. We've got Dr. Deborah Furr Holden with us, and and Pastor Brooks, you've got to get her to your church to talk to people because we've been able to get so much information from her. Absolutely. We've been able to get so much information about COVID-19, but about our health, about public health. She's helping us to really think of things that quite frankly, we haven't really thought about. You know, we've all had to become epidemiologists and scientists and doctors and nurses and all of that over the past year trying to figure it all out. And Dr. Deb, epidemiologist and the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. Indeed, she's really helping them to build their School of Public Health. We're so honored that you're with us all the time. When we bring on Dr. Walks, the former the former chief health officer in Washington, D.C. at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be talking about diabetes, sugar, and 500 million people have diabetes all across the world. That's a lot of folks, everybody, and most don't know it. But before we get there, I came across something, Dr. Deb, that I wanted to ask you about because, science and technology, well, they've merged. And now we're seeing that Google is going to play a big, 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 big role in science. I mean, they're going to be working on the algorithms, and that could guide treatment. Do you think that's a good thing? Yeah,
I'm sorry. Good morning.
Good morning. Is that a good thing? I mean, they're going to be working with a particular hospital chain to develop healthcare algorithms. Is that good? I mean, what does that mean?
I'm not sure. What do you mean a healthcare algorithm?
Well, I mean, according to this story, this national health chain, HCA Healthcare, They struck a deal to develop healthcare algorithms using patient records, the latest foray by this tech giant into the $3 trillion sector. They're going to be looking at your records, and they will help to guide doctors on how to treat you.
Well, I can't imagine that anybody would want that. It's so funny. That's the whole point of having a physician, a trained physician, right?
Yeah.
Let us not forget, medicine is not an exact science, right? And so if you can just dump my data into a machine and an algorithm can give you the course of treatment, what is the whole point of having a doctor? Here's the big problem that I see with that also. We don't take context or anything about a person's lived experience mostly into play when we start making diagnoses and coming up with treatment plans. When you are treating a person, and the reason you need a person to diagnose and treat and interact with a person is because people live in a context. People don't live in a vacuum. They don't live in a computer. People are surrounded by a certain set of conditions. People have the jobs that they have. They have the transportation that they have. There's all of these factors that shape and influence health and health behaviors. And all of that has to be a part of the picture also. And that's nothing that you can compute or, have some magic formula for. That's something that has to be an interaction between a person and another person. So, we're always trying to build a better mousetrap. So it doesn't surprise me that somebody would say, oh, well, I can automate this whole process for you. You don't need all those doctors. But I won't be at the front of the line for that.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm following you, Dr. Deb, because I won't either. I don't think Reverend Brooks will be either, because I like talking to people. They help me. I can help them help me. And the more honest you are, everybody, with your physician, the better the results. Just tell them whatever it is that you do, because it's a private relationship. They're not supposed to be able to divulge anything that you tell them. Anything that you've done, tell them, because then they can help you. What about the discussion now about where the coronavirus and COVID-19 specifically came from? We now know something that, quite frankly, they were saying last year under the Trump administration, that this originated in China. Maybe he didn't say it the way I'd like for him to have said it, but he kept pushing that point. And we were hearing that there were workers at this pathogens lab in Wuhan, one of the biggest in the world. Wuhan, China, everybody's a city of more than 10 million people. It dwarfs. It's New York City, but not in 5 boroughs. It's just on one pack of land. So it's a huge lab that there's a lot of international interaction and cooperation. But at least a couple of the workers there got very sick and had to be hospitalized with COVID-19. So now, 1 year later, even though this was something that the Trump administration tried to do, they said, okay, we need to find out where this came from. You have Dr. Redfield who said this did not evolve naturally. What is it? Does it matter where it came from and how it developed, Dr. Deborah Holden?
I think what matters to people is the truth. The very people who hold likely the key to that information are also the same people that are giving us information about the virus and the vaccines and treatment and other resources. The people that wield the power. If you can't trust them over here, then why would you trust them over there? I do think that it matters. People are big people and they can handle the truth. But with the truth also comes some sense of responsibility and accountability. And so that is my biggest concern, that not telling people the truth is to hide something that you don't want to be accountable or responsible for. But all that does is undermine people's trust. And to me, we have a lot of good, valid, well-earned government mistrust in this country. So I do think people need to know, and I think they deserve to know.
Well, let me tell you what Renee Criswell wrote. Yeah, Renee, I'm calling you out, and you should call in anyway, because we're about to talk about sugar. diabetes, what our grandparents used to call sugar. So was the virus created in a lab or not, she asked. If it was created in a lab, is that why a vaccine was created and available at warp speed? Because they both, uh, because the virus and the antidote arrived at the same time. Now, couldn't be, could it? And people like that, and Renee is brilliant woman. She's got brilliant kids, and she's a thinker, and she's someone who reads. We talk to Renee all the time. And you can hear the mistrust and the distrust. So what do you say to Renee? I mean, because she says, she wants to know. She wants to know, where did this come from? Where do we go from here, Dr. Deb?
Well, I do caution people about stringing too many bits of knowledge together.
Okay.
So mRNA vaccine technology has revolutionized vaccine development. It just has. And I remind people this didn't just come about during COVID.
Okay.
This technology has been under development for about 2 decades. It was coming. So those two things might not be related, because we'll be able to develop candidate vaccines for a variety of viruses now because of this technology. So those two
1 minute
necessarily go together. But what that again points back to is, when you don't tell people the truth, they can sense it. They might not know exactly what's not true about what you're saying, but people know when they're being lied to, right? We talked a bit about this yesterday. And this will give way to the kind of doubt and suspicion and upset that I think will only undermine these vaccine efforts that are underway, and will push people away from potentially resources and things that actually are in their best interest. So I think people deserve the truth.
We deserve the truth. I mean, like you said, we're big people. We're grown people. Tell
15.
people the truth so that we can work our way, not just through this, but the other pandemics they say that are coming, and just really our own health, generally
5.
speaking. Everybody, let's talk about diabetes. Why do so many people all across the world have it? And they don't know about it. They don't know they have it. Back with the Santita Jackson Show, just a few minutes. Okay, Paul, that gets a little hot, so we need to bring it down just a little bit, because they're saying that the music's just a little loud. Okay, Dr. Deb, sugar, sugar, sugar. you know, our parents, our grandparents were so cute. You got sugar.
I know, right?
Oh, you got sugar. Like, oh, but you know what? Let me tell you, one of my girlfriends, one of my best friends, was she's up on the vineyard every summer, and her mother was like a raging diabetic, and she's a physician. And she called me. She said, "Tita, I've got diabetes." I said, "Whoa, how do you know?" Because the shuttle, is you can't get back to the main island after a certain hour. If you've been up to the vineyard, because
We have Dr. Walks.
It's an island, right? So she said, and I can't get back to the mainland. She said, but this is what I did. I went to the restroom, and I tasted my urine. She said, and it tasted like Kool-Aid, girl. I said, oh wow, are you serious? She said, no. She said, I'm gonna go in tomorrow. She said, but it tasted like Kool-Aid, and that got me, and it just chilled me, because she's one of my best friends to date. And you say, whoa, hold on. Well, what does that mean? If it's like washing through your body like that, what's that? So it's something to think about. But we've got one of our favorite persons here, Dr. Deb, Dr. Ivan Walks.
Hey, morning.
Of course, we're talking about sugar. I just, I guess I'm feeling a little nostalgic for my grandparents today. So it's well, it's a good thing, because now I can laugh about so many of their idiosyncrasies. I guess I'll put it like that. How about that? they were precious. They were a precious group of people. My grandma Gertrude would not let us bring Chicago filth into her house. You had to put your bags, leave your bags in the garage where she washed everything before before you could bring the bags in. Um, but she worked in a hospital, and she also came from grinding poverty as a child, and it made her. She was hyper vigilant about dirt, a speck of dirt. Um, and that's the thing. She was hyper vigilant about that, and was also hyper vigilant about health, by the way. Because really, she wasn't keen on meat, and she really was a vegetarian most of her life. Now, she would have the occasional piece of chicken, but I would say from her 60s on, she didn't touch it. Nothing that was flesh at all. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Wouldn't touch it. And the doctor told us, because even with her health issues at the end of her life, the doctor said, well, because she had all of her teeth, and even though she'd had a stroke, her vitals were just fantastic. And she kept pushing till the end also. And he said, well, my mother said, well, my mother's
Back in 30.
vegetarian. And he said, I tell you what, we kill the animals, then the animals kill us. He said, let that be a lesson to you, Mrs. Jackson. I said, oh. So I can't have any more chicken? Okay, just kidding. But you know what? It made me think about it. Because nothing, if it didn't come out the ground or didn't fall off a tree, she wouldn't touch it. Nope.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Speaking of that, the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820 in Chicago, AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and all around the world. I got one of my friends from Puerto Rico sending you much love this morning, and our brothers and sisters from Brazil and people from all over the country and all over the world on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. And please join Big Bree over there on the Santita Jackson Show channel on YouTube, and of course Santita Jackson IG and the Santita J show on Instagram and Twitter. And so I wanna hear from you today. We want to talk about diabetes, about sugar. That's what a lot of our elders used to call it. And let's first define what it is. Um, we want to see if we can avoid getting it. And I was struck by this because I came across this headline that showed you that 500 million people in the world have diabetes, but most of them don't know it. This is the researchers from the University of Michigan up there by you, Dr. Deborah Verholden, have found that the number of people with diabetes has more than quadrupled worldwide since 1980, when it was only about 108 million people. They found that the disease is also no longer the sole property, if you will, of wealthy countries. It has really, really grown in the global south. Wow. So I want to know, what do you think about this? 80% of people with diabetes currently live in low and middle income countries. Wow. The Lancet, one of the world's foremost medical journals, published this study. So we've got Dr. Ivan Walks, former Commissioner of Public Health in Washington, D.C., and of course, Dr. Deborah Verholden, epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. We welcome you to the show. Dr. Deb and I do. Dr. Walks, when you hear about these numbers, 500 million people, and the numbers have quadrupled in 41 years, really in 2 generations. Should we be alarmed by that?
Absolutely, we should be alarmed by that, because when we look at public health, we're looking at policy and we're looking at populations. And when we think about illness, we really have to think about it one person at a time. Each one of us has to look at our habits. You mentioned earlier, Santita, your grandmother and her habits, the habits of cleanliness, the habits of what kind of food she eats and she ate, and what she encouraged others to eat by her example. And I think that's something that we sort of take lightly. So what the heck is diabetes? Diabetes is your body not managing sugar the way that your body was designed to manage sugar. And when you talk about people having it and not knowing they have it, the human body, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we try to fix everything that we do to ourselves. You cut yourself, what does your body do? It tries to heal. You eat too much bad food and your body tries to do something good with it. Our bodies are struggling all the time against what we're doing. So how do you wind up with all of these bad things growing and developing in countries where folks don't have a lot of money? Well, people stop the habits of their grandparents. People aren't living rurally. And that Lancet article is really a good one to read because it digs into a little bit about how people live differently now than they lived before. They're in more urban areas. Years ago, some of the most horrible things I read was how they feed people. Now I'm coming back to our country and our inner cities here in America, where we just get bad food in these little pop-up stores, whatever you want to call them, in our neighborhoods, where they feed us all this high sugar, high calorie stuff that's bad for us, and it's cheap, and so we buy it, and so we eat it, and then over time, our body is like, hey, I give up. You're not supposed to put all that sugar in me. I'm trying to put insulin out, and those kinds of things are a big problem. So what do? We have to begin to be serious about what we put into our bodies and how we care for our bodies. Inactivity is one of the issues with diabetes. What are we doing? We didn't used to have a whole bunch of video games so cheaply to play years ago. Kids are sitting around inside the house. When I was in medical school 100 years ago, type 2 diabetes was something that adults got. It used to be called adult onset diabetes. Now we're seeing young people with adult onset, allegedly, supposedly diabetes, because they're sitting around, they're eating high fat, high sugar, high calorie foods. They're not exercising. So we have to look at our families and look at our habits. What are we doing? What are we eating? That's our primary issue right now. What are we doing? What are we eating? And then, are we getting checkups? Are we going to the doctor? Are we trying to find out if something is going on? Because if you're sitting around, and I'll try to make this really quick. If you're sitting around and suddenly you find yourself, hey, I'm thirsty all the time. I didn't used to be thirsty so much. Or I'm going to the bathroom. I'm trying to urinate all the time. What is that about? Or I'm just feeling more hungry all the time. I'm losing weight. I feel tired. And then things get really bad. Then, my vision isn't the same. My vision is kind of blurred. Every time I get cut or I get a sore, it heals differently. I get infections easily. That's your body telling you it's not working the way it's supposed to. And anytime your body tells you it's not working the way it's supposed to, you've got some issues. You need to get checked out.
Dr. Deb, because you deal with public health, when you see this sharp rise in diabetes, just since 1980, I mean, the numbers are quadrupling. And quite frankly, when we bring our fast foods into these countries, they see a sharp rise in diabetes. When they adopt the Western diet, they see a sharp rise in diabetes. What is our takeaway from all of this?
Well, we in general, it's funny because we have more healthcare and more healthcare innovation, but we have way worse healthcare habits than I think we've had in the past. And it's funny, the very basic things that I tell people, during COVID, how to boost your immune system. These are the things to promote your health throughout your whole life. Moving your arms and legs on a regular basis, right? We say, 30 minutes of movement every day, intentional and on purpose. High nutrient diet. These high fat, high sodium, high calorie, low nutrient diets take a toll on the body. I don't know if you remember the movie Super Size Me. It was a documentary about a guy who went on a 30-day fast food binge, and he did nothing but eat fast food for all of his meals for 30 days. I think it was around maybe like day 14, he developed fatty liver. They said his liver was functioning the same way as somebody who was drinking like 10 or 15 drinks per day. That's how much stress that food had placed on his body and his liver's ability to, process fat. So, what goes in our mouth, how much we, move our arms and legs, all of these things are primary drivers of health. And it's not a trivial thing to see these numbers go up because diabetes is related to so many other things. It just impacts so many other aspects of our health and how our body functions and does not function. And it just as a global society, we just don't live as healthy as we've lived in the past in the face of all of this health and healthcare.
What happens, Nicole Barrett, you brought forth a really, really important question. If you get a pre-diabetic diagnosis, what happens with that? She says you got to take the necessary steps to avoid getting diabetes. Dr. Walks, how can you do that? Because I've been hypoglycemic, and I took steps that stopped me from developing diabetes, thank God. What is pre-diabetes? What is hypoglycemia? What is hyperglycemia? What are these maladies?
Well, to just Santita, to just break it down very, very simply, because I like to be able to understand things very, very simply. Hypo means low, hyper means high. So hypoglycemia and glycemia, emia means what's in the blood. Glyco has to do with glucose. So break down the words, they're easy to understand. Hypoglycemia, low sugar in the blood. Hyperglycemia, high sugar in the blood, right? So easy for us to understand these words that doctors kind of throw around. Here's the issue. If your resting blood sugar, basically this, if you eat and 1 to 2 hours after you eat, your blood sugar is still high, and sometimes they talk about the numbers being a little bit different or what's expected at a certain age. But essentially, if your fasting blood sugar, your resting blood sugar is somewhere up around 180, 200, you have you're getting to the diabetes range. If you're down below that, but above 120 to 140, you're in the pre-diabetes range. So that 120 to 140, okay, 140 to 200, pre-diabetes, 180 or so and above, diabetes. What do those numbers mean? Well, and here's the thing. You're not going to sit at home and measure those numbers all by yourself at the beginning. Why are you not going to do that? Because here's the biggest problem for us. The things that kill us are in a category of things that we call silent killers, right? So high blood pressure kills us. People always say, well, how do you feel? How you feel has really little to do with what's happening inside of your body, because as I said at the beginning, your body keeps trying to fix all the bad stuff we're doing to it. It's trying to fix all of that fast food you're eating. It's trying to fix the fact that, unlike what Dr. Deb advises, you're not getting your 30 minutes of intentional movement every day, and you're sitting around. So you're silently killing your body, and that's the only way to say it. And by the time we begin to feel these things, it's a problem. So what do? Get up and move around, eat better, pay attention to all the stuff that we read, because it's hard to reverse things when they get bad. Can you reverse pre-diabetes and not go on to diabetes? Yes. Can you actually make your diabetes much, much better with your behavior? Yes. But what's the first thing you have to do? You have to find out where you are. You have to go to the doctor. You have to get these regular checkups we keep talking about. And you have to stop saying to yourself, oh, I feel fine. There can't be anything wrong. I feel fine. How you feel is relevant, but how you feel is not the final answer to how you are and how your health is.
Dr. Deb, many of us don't have a primary care physician. I mean, what do you do about that? I mean, how do you help to educate the public so that they know when they go to it? Many of us we still, Dr. Walks and Dr. Deb, we go to the emergency room. You don't go get a physical. And I'm not slamming anyone. Healthcare in this country is still just beyond the grasp of most people, or many, if not most people. It's just, it costs.
I understand, and these I won't pretend as if these are easy problems for individuals to solve, because I do think it's a societal problem, right? People should experience health and health care and access to health care as a right and not a privilege, and it's unfortunate that having good quality health care and even worse, affordable health care for many people is a privilege. However, there are right now opportunities for people to remedy that. Affordable care has literally become a whole lot more affordable. There are now rebates available, and this is, the part of the fallout from COVID. And we're hoping, again, that the things that COVID revealed to us really will prompt some of our leaders to say, these are problems that need long-term solutions, not short-term solutions or quick fixes, but long-term solutions. So you could literally be up to 400% of the federal poverty level right now and get health care for as little as $10 a month. These are premiums where formerly people were paying $600 to $800 a month and said, I simply can't afford that. I'll just pay the penalty when I do my taxes for not having health care. So I do encourage people, reach out to your local health plan. You just put in the county you live in and health plan. And there is some local agency that's tasked with making sure that everybody in your community has access to health care coverage. If you don't have a primary health care provider, I cannot stress this enough. Everybody needs access to a primary health care provider. So the kind of acute or urgent care that you get in an emergency department is not going to be the kind of care that you're going to need to be able to support and maintain your health in the long run. The great thing about a primary health care provider is they are on your health team. They get to know you. They get to understand you. They have your health history. They have all of your health records. And so having somebody on your health team that is with you consistently and over time is the best approach. You don't want a new healthcare provider every time you show up for care. And that is likely what you will be getting when you use the emergency department for healthcare. So if you don't have a primary care provider, or if you're uninsured or underinsured, meaning the insurance that you have doesn't meet all of your needs, or it's not very affordable, right? Some people have insurance premiums and copays that make, using their insurance very unattractive. Some people have, minimums that they have to hit before the benefits kick in, deductibles, and that makes insurance very unattractive for people to actually use it. Reach out to your local federally qualified health center, FQHC. Put your county in, put FQHC in. Almost every community, major city where this show would be broadcasting, has multiple federally qualified health centers. I live in Flint, Michigan, and Genesee County. We're very small. We have 2 federally qualified health centers. They're the stake in the ground for people in the community, and they ensure that everybody has access at a minimum to primary and preventive care services. So everybody needs that. This is not one of those things where you want to wait until you get sick to develop a relationship with somebody. Can you imagine making life-changing decisions about your health with a stranger? That's what happens when you don't have a primary care provider. You don't want to get married at first sight when you get a cancer diagnosis or something like that. So I just really encourage people, get a primary health care provider and explore affordable care if you're uninsured or underinsured.
It's very, very important. I mean, Dr. Walks, I think we really need to understand much more about our health even. We need to know our healthcare providers. We need to establish that. And you can. But type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, what was striking to me was that 90% of the people in this study had type 2 diabetes. Would you explain the difference between type 1 and type 2? Because it seems that type 2 can be prevented or mitigated in some way.
Well, type 2 diabetes tends to be the one that happens to your body over time when you're not taking good care of your body. Type 1 diabetes means that you're not making insulin, basically. You have And again, I like to be able to explain things very, very simply. So there's a part of your body called the pancreas that makes insulin. Insulin is produced when sugar either comes out of your liver or is put into your mouth. And so the insulin tells your cells, hey, get this sugar, take it in, use it, store it up. We're going to need this because this is how we get energy, and that's what the glucose is, right? So if your body isn't making insulin, then you're not going to be able to manage sugar very well, and that's the type 1 diabetes. I don't have insulin, and so I need insulin. And so they used to say it's insulin-dependent diabetes, meaning you have to use insulin in order to treat your diabetes or to manage your blood sugar level. That's type 1. Now, type 2 is you're making insulin, but your body isn't responding to it. Your cells have something called insulin resistance. Now, you can sometimes need to treat that diabetes with insulin. So the whole thing about insulin dependent or non-insulin dependent is kind of difficult to talk about. So I tend to talk about whether your body is making insulin. If it's not type 1, if your body is making insulin, if your body is not making insulin, type 1, if your body is making insulin but not responding to the insulin, that's the type 2, the insulin resistance type. And so it's, again, these aren't things you kind of figure out at home. These are not things you wait until you don't feel good or your vision is blurred or your feet get numb or you begin to have tingling in your fingers or in your feet. That means you've got something going on that's been happening for a while and very difficult to reverse and very, very painful if you let these kinds of things go. And ultimately it's going to kill you. So let's just keep it as real as we can. These are things that kill you. So type 1, type 2, whichever one it is, what it ultimately means is that your body is not managing sugar the way it needs to. And it needs sugar for energy. We need that. So your body's not managing sugar well. You need to get some help for that. But at the beginning, we need to make sure that we are protecting our health, that we have a primary care provider, and that we are not letting ourselves wait until, well, something doesn't feel right. Oh, my goodness. The something doesn't feel right is late. It's really late.
How is it that people cannot know they have diabetes? I mean, is there, how do you
How can people?
Yeah.
So you don't know because it's sort of normal to get thirsty, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of us have suddenly felt we have to go to the bathroom. We're doing something and we're not paying attention, and it's been a few hours, and I got to go. The difference is that it's incrementally different. So it's not like you've never been thirsty before in your life and now you have excessive thirst and you notice it. You just find yourself being more thirsty. It's not that you've never had to go to the bathroom before, but now you have to go more often. So it's things like that that occur over time, and you don't notice things are getting worse. You don't notice your body is having trouble doing the things that it used to normally do. You can't go for a ride in the car for 3 hours. Maybe you used to before, but now you can't. And not because your back hurts, but because you got to go to the bathroom every time you even think about it, every time you drink something. So there are a lot of things that go wrong. Again, I go back to this silent killer thing and the very important message to folks that there are things going on in our bodies all the time that we can't wait until we feel it in order to try to fix it.
Dr. Deb, silent killer, that's big, but I think it's also, it can spur us to action. I mean, what should we be doing? Just a few weeks ago, Dr. Walks, we were talking about growing some of your own vegetables. My mother took me into her garden on Sunday. She's so proud. She showed me the tomatoes, and she showed me the pole beans and the different kinds of kale and the collards. And I think it's my parents' yard where we used to play is about to become a farm. No joke. But you know what? I mean, the cucumbers, we used some. I mean, we were eating some of that food on Sunday that she has grown. And she said, this is what I trust. She said, you need to figure out getting some dirt on your terrace so that you can grow something, because that makes sense. And I think the time is now for us to be proactive. I mean, because this is really hitting the global South, or should I say brown and black countries. I mean, hard. I remember a little more than 20 years ago, there was a national study in which they were looking for black people, indigenous people, Latinx people, um, Indian people. They were looking for all people of color to look at diabetes. They were trying to study this. This was in the late 90s, maybe 25 years ago now. And I heard it in Washington, where I spent time. I lived in New York at the time. I heard it in Chicago. I went to Los Angeles. I mean, I have the blessing of being able to travel. And so I heard the same commercial and the same study. They were trying to find people to participate in it then, like 99, 2000. Dr. Deb, well, here we are all these years later, and we're seeing an explosion. We've seen an explosion of this. Where do we go from here? You got a minute, and I'm going to give a minute to Dr. Walks.
Well, there's always the opportunity in front of people. Like I say, take the reins of your health. It's never too late. The human body is a really amazing and dynamic creation. I have my husband has diabetes, and he's been able to regulate his diabetes basically with diet and exercise. That won't be the case for everybody, and I like how Dr. Walks breaks it down for us so people can understand the difference between type 1 and type 2. But regardless, a lot of this is in our hands. And I know sometimes people will complain about the price point of certain foods, and Lord knows going to Whole Foods is, price prohibitive for many people. But you don't have to go to Whole Foods. There are plenty of places that provide healthy, affordable food options. So this is the time to really just building blocks. Just start with the basic building blocks, moving your arms and legs, eating a high nutrient-dense diet, and the most nutrient-dense foods tend to be the ones without a label. Those are the best foods for us. Most of those foods don't have a label on them.
30.
And get a healthcare provider, a primary healthcare provider who can be a partner with you and on your health team. But you should be at the helm. You should have the wheel of your own health team. And you should have a primary healthcare provider on that team with you, helping to navigate.
And that's going to wrap it up, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Dr. Ivan Walks, thank God for you. Our bodies are wonderfully and powerfully made, everybody. Take care of it. Dr. Deborah Furholzer. We're going to be talking about HBCUs. Why do they have to pay more for bonds? That stands between them and development and making their own money. There's a reason Howard's endowment is far below that of Harvard's. Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in a minute. I just love you all. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome, Santita. One little comment maybe you can share with your listeners. We talk a lot about generational wealth and about building wealth for generations. We can do the same thing with health. I call it generational health. We have to teach our children how to eat. We have to stop giving them all those sweet snacks all the time, and we have to help them. As adults, we talk about how we should eat. If we begin to build generational health with our children, we can begin to reverse all of these things.
Will you come on next week and you, Dr. Deb, and I can talk about that?
I'm always happy to hang out with you and Dr. Deb. Whenever Dr. Deb is talking, I'm learning, so I'm good with that.
Me too. Let me write this down. No, but I would love to do that because that's a real thing.
It is a real thing. Yeah.
It's a real thing. I remember my father making a comment. I was in Washington visiting. I was living in New York at the time. I'll never forget it. We were riding down K Street and we were passing this gym that he goes to because my father in his day, he even tries to treat his therapy as, he's an ex-athlete. He can't get out of that. And he was saying that he said what's amazing is that when they open the gym, we lobbied to get them to open it at 5 a.m. because the people who go, well, like CEOs and whatnot. And so they had to be at work. They had to be at the office early. And they wanted to open it earlier than 5. He said, but what's amazing to me is that all of these men, he said, and now women, who run corporate America, who run the government, They are in the gym first thing in the morning. Maxine Waters is in her 80s. She's in the gym before she does anything. These people are serious about their health. Just like they're serious about everything else. They're serious about it. So generational health, oh yeah. Because this doesn't have to happen, everybody. It doesn't have to happen. Does not have to happen. We don't have to live like this. This doesn't have to be. And I think we have to be honest with each other about what we're doing. When I'm walking around, we're going to get Dr. Fakarede back on with us, Dr. Deb. When you see all of these black people in our community, and you go to poor communities and you see people in wheelchairs because they're amputees, come on.
Yes.
And we need to demand food justice. You want to bundle up a Happy Meal for me? I think, hey, I like a Big Mac like everybody else every now and then. But they need to bundle up some vegetables and some fruit at the stores too. How about a Happy Meal that? You know what I'm saying? What is this? No. Because I gotta pay to be healthy. Whole paycheck. You know what store I'm talking about. That's what you know that, but that's where my grandmama went. And my brother Jonathan, is Jonathan up yet? Paul, okay. My brother, when he would go to Washington, because that's where she stayed in our parents' home there. He did a video of her going through the beans, because she used to pick beans as a child and chop sugarcane. And she wanted to show him how to get the right beans. And it would take her like 30, 40 minutes, sometimes an hour, to find the right bag of beans. Then she'd go to something else. She loved going through Whole Foods, whole paycheck. She loved it. And she would select her food. She was and she went throughout the week. She said, "You're not supposed to hold food a week." She said, "What is this?" She said, "You don't know what they're putting on your food. You better think about that." She was right. She was right. My grandmama was right. So here we go. Here we go. Well, let me, please keep trying him. Please keep trying him. Please keep trying him, Paul. Uh-oh. Let me try him here. But I'm going to let you all go. And thank you so much. We're going to do that next week.
Okay.
We're going to do that next
Sounds good.
week. Generational health. I love it. Let me see if
you all have a blessed and fabulous day. Take care.
You two have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.
Yes, you too.
Thank
okay.
you.
Bye, Dr. Deb. Take care. All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Trying to get my brother going. I knew he was. Okay, do we have him up yet, Paul?
Nope.
Oh, please keep trying him, please, please, please. Oh my goodness, Jonathan. Okay, well, let me just put this up here. Okay. Keep trying him, Paul. Hey, hon, he's going to call you now. Okay. Paul, he just answered. Hello? Are you still there? Hello, hello? Okay.
All right, we have him in 30 seconds.
Okay,
Good morning.
Hey, hon, how are you?
I'm doing fine. And yourself?
Good. Make sure you come off the speaker, honey. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Glad that you're with us
I will.
today. Thank you. I'll go through a few headlines and we're going to get right to it.
15.
Um,
10.
Ten.
I'm coming up.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, I'm coming now. I'm just letting you know.
5.
Okay.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Oh, I love it. I'm Santita Jackson. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, May 27th, 2021. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and join our brothers and sisters from all over the world over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Puerto Rico checked in this morning. Love it, love it, love it. And of course, Brazil and people from the mother continent of Africa. And I love it. I love it. Everybody from all over the country, all over the country. Thinking about you, Linear Bob. I want you to check in today because I'm concerned about what happened in San Jose yesterday. Another mass shooting, everybody. Praying for San Jose and praying for everybody all over the world, all over the world. Call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text, but I want to hear your voices today. I want to know what you're thinking about HBCUs and the fact that they have to pay more to get some money. I mean, it's 20% more for bonds. And Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push, is going to talk with us about that. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to be joined by Dr. Max Wolf, as he joins us every Thursday at the bottom of the hour. And he's going to talk to us about inflation. And he says, there's not a labor shortage. He said it's a wage shortage. Ow. Can't wait to talk with him about that. Let's get to some of these headlines. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 59 degrees. It's a lot cooler, but it's still a beautiful day, and it will rain today, though, here. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 51 degrees, rain. The Dow closed up 10 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 80 points. The S&P 500 closed up 7 points. The Cubs will be facing off against the Pirates today. Well, the Cardinals bested the White Sox 4-0. They'll be facing off against them today. Orioles versus the White Sox. And then, well, the Twins are triumphant over the Orioles, everybody. They get a little rest tonight. The NBA playoffs are in full effect. The Wizards, well, they fell to the 76ers. 76ers 120, Wizards 95. Knicks 101, Hawks 92. The Grizzlies 129, but the Jazz, well, they came out on top, 141, everybody. The Bucks will be playing the Heat tonight. The Lakers will be playing the Suns. The Nuggets will be playing the Trailblazers. The Nets will be playing the Celtics. Exciting time of year when everybody is playing, everybody. So, let's talk about some more of these headlines. 9 people were killed yesterday by one of their own after a gunman opened fire yesterday at the Valley Transportation Authority light rail yard in San Jose, California. The shooter, who worked there, is also dead, and police believe that he took his own life. The shooting happened as the night and morning shift overlapped, and rail activity was starting up for the day. No motive has been released, but the mayor of San Jose, Sam Ricardo, said that, quote, the victims and all the colleagues knew the shooter well. God bless them. President Biden has asked the U.S. intelligence community to double down on efforts to investigate the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic in Wuhan and report back to him in 90 days. It is important to note that this is an intelligence operation, not a scientific inquiry, and it's not clear how many answers the intelligence community will be able to cull. So what do you think is going to happen, everybody? Does it matter to you? Well, it's now become an issue. Meanwhile, the study has revealed a majority of severe COVID-19 cases brought on long-term symptoms and long haulers, everybody. So think about that, everybody. The Biden administration is receiving pressure from Black civil rights leaders to make headway on the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. President Biden had wanted that act to be passed by May 25th, a couple of days ago, the first anniversary of George Floyd's killing. It did not happen, everybody. So, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? Will it pass? Will it come through? We're going to find out, everybody. Well, there was a big big win in the environmental movement, everybody. A court in the Netherlands ordered Royal Dutch Shell yesterday to slash emissions harder and faster than they planned. Investors in ExxonMobil won 2 board seats and promised to push the energy giant to diversify beyond oil and fight climate change. Chevron shareholders backed a proposal to force the company to cut pollution by its customers. Things are moving, everybody. Things are moving. Things are changing. So, everybody, I want you to call me. Text me at 773-763-WCBT and let's talk today. Elizabeth Warren is on the move, everybody. She's on the move. She and Jamie Dimon clashed yesterday as she went at them about charging overdraft fees during the pandemic. I like that woman. Let's talk about the difference between the endowment at Harvard and the difference between the endowment at Howard. And Howard's a wealthy black school, relatively speaking. But HBCUs, which really they've given us Dr. Martin Luther King, they've given us Reverend Andrew Young, they've given us Reverend Jesse Jackson, they've given us so many of the giants in our history, Mayor Maynard Jackson, and they've given us Raphael Warnock from Morehouse, the senator from Georgia, the pastor of Ebenezer, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's church, our own vice president, so proud. Kamala Harris came out of Howard. And we just keep on going. I mean, the record of those who are produced by HBCUs. I mean, Dr. Ronald McNair, the astronaut who was on the Challenger expedition. He came out of North Carolina A&T, and so did Reggie Lewis. And many of these persons were taken into HBCUs, not the persons I've named, but Dr. McNair, interestingly enough, was a high-risk student when A&T brought him in. But they saw his genius and they worked with him. And many of our black professionals come out of these HBCUs. Having said that, we find that it is harder for HBCUs to get solid financial footing. They pay 20% more for bonds because investors are less willing to invest in institutions. It's a 2016 study that shows that racial discrimination is really at the heart of HBCUs needing Jonathan Jackson to pay thousands more than white institutions to issue bonds. Why is that important? Jonathan Jackson joins us. He, of course, is the national spokesman for Rainbow Push, proud alum of North Carolina A&T, Aggie Pride. Aggie Pride is the largest black school in the country now, more than 14,000 students. When you hear about this, Jonathan, what do you see? Okay, let's bring Jonathan Jackson up.
I'm here. Hi, Santita.
Hey. HBCUs pay 20% more for bonds because investors are less willing to invest in black institutions. Even with those records of accomplishment, what's going on?
Santita, it is the long tradition of slavery manifesting itself once again in another institution. These are the financial institutions. There was one of the laws in post-slavery in the black codes where you could, where white institutions would not outbid one another, white landowners, for black labor. So therefore, they had to suppress the wages. In this instance, you see major white institutions have a similar attitude on, if I'm going to do something with the Negro, it's going to be pay me more for it. What are you going to give me if I've got to work with those people? It's the animosity that's manifesting itself again. So it's a tax in effect on their conscience, or you're going to reward me at a higher risk reward return for something that's not risky in order to invest in it. Now, you have to make the comparison. You can buy Russian bonds. These people will invest in Russian bonds at a lower return rate, a lower coupon rate than they will in historically black institutions down the block from their house. An older institution that's more credible, that's in their same currency, but they want to be paid more than what they would be willing to put their money abroad, in another foreign country, even in a communist country. Even if they invested in communist China, they're willing to accept a lower return than what they would accept in their own state in an institution that's 100 years older with continuity. It's racism in the financial markets, clearly.
But how does that impact a black school? I mean, because, we know that, explain endowments and, the monies that college presidents have to raise to keep their universities going. We saw Dr. Julianne Malveaux, brilliant economist, and she was very excited to get to Bennett College for Women. MIT trained, no one's more brilliant than Dr. Julianne Malveaux. And she caught so much flack trying to get these young people educated. I mean, it was just trying to raise the money. And now that I see that bonds are an issue, Jonathan, please help us to understand this.
Okay, not to confuse people, let's look at a home mortgage that a lot of people are very much familiar with. A mortgage is another name for a bond. It's a 30-year commitment for a debt instrument on your house. Replace the term mortgage with a bond, same absolute product. And if one person is offered 5% and another family is offered 8% on a $200,000 loan, one family is going to pay $700 a month for the same credit score. Another family is going to pay $1,100 a month for the same amount of credit. But at a 3%, at 300 basis points is a technical term, or 3% difference in the markup from 5% to 8%. Over the course of the year, that's a $4,800 savings for one family, and that's a $400,000 or $4,800 tax on the other family. What could you do with $4,800? Vacation, music lessons, athletic fees, family entertainment, home improvements. There's so many things that a family can do with that extra $4,800. Put that onto $1 billion, and now you see what the difference can be. For example, in the city of Chicago, the bonds that are on the CPS, our Chicago Public School System, our children are paying almost 10% of our city's annual school budget just on interest. So take 10% out of all the money that could be going into children's food programs, into teacher salaries, into improving educational facilities, is just going on servicing money on the school debt. These children didn't accrue the debt, but they have to pay for the debt. That's coming off their table. So take 10 cents out of every dollar, take $1 out of every 10, and that's simply going to reward financial institutions that were subsidized by the federal government and bank bailouts. The banks that are lending money, not only they get bailed out, then they raise the interest rates on the children. Now you take that over into the bond market, if you will, for the historically black colleges. When you're saying you're paying 20% interest rates, that's higher than a used credit card connection. That is of the lowest of the lows. So they're basically saying you have no credibility in our eyesight in one way to pay us back. Or if you do, I'm going to stick with tradition and just simply overcharge you because that's what everybody else has done. Why would I offer you less if you pay more to someone else?
And Jonathan, it turns out that this is even more prevalent in the schools that are in the South, that have a history of the pronounced racial animus. There's racial animus all over the country. But where you had Jim Crow, this is even more true. Wow.
And Santita, it is consistent. When you make the laws harder for voting, where's that across the country? And I'd really like to expand that and put that in the North. What they've done in the North is you may have 2 or 3 and they're under the same condition, and other schools have gotten run out of business. I tried to tie in the Chicago public schools because be it an HBCU or any urban school district, they're going through the same thing. And the urban school districts do have tax-exempt bonds, but they're made to pay more. Now they say that the municipality is at risk, and it could be of a credit default. Well, you have to ask yourself, how can private financial institutions that just got bailed out, that clearly had failed, why is their interest rates lower? How are they more credible than these institutions that did not fail, that did not take on predatory loans, that did not buy junk bonds, that did not do anything risky with their fundamental financial obligations? Now, when you talk about endowments, endowments are basically foundations, nonprofit, if you will, institutions, the endowment, that have a law where they have to contribute, give away almost 5% of their money a year in order to pay for salaries and tuitions, to do charitable goods. The idea comes from, you can put money in an endowment, a tax-exempt financial institution, because you're going to be doing essentially things that the government deems worthy and valuable. So you're going to get a tax credit, a tax deduction for making your investment in these endowments. Now, when you look at University of Chicago, $3 billion plus, Harvard University, $30 billion plus, and these institutions have enough money to subsidize all of their students' tuitions. Now they have some of them have outlived their purposes. Now they're banks. Have been transmogrified, if you will, into something. So they're losing their original intent. So I would think one of the solutions is after you reach a certain number and the IRS can arbitrarily assess that, no, you don't have to give away 5%. You've got to give away 7%. You've got to give away even more. And if your school doesn't want to accept anymore, give it to the next institution that's educating American students that have financial problems. Santita, all of this, the financial economy, the economy is a set of a cooperation. And so we need to make sure there's no holes in the inner tube. And that's what you saw in subprime, just holes in the inner tube. If you're overcharging somebody, the market is not moving efficiently. The theory says if you're overcharging, somebody else will step in. The practice doesn't say that at all. If you're overcharging, then everybody else will overcharge you. If somebody's getting abused, then the other institutions will abuse you. So throw away the theory on how it's supposed to work. Oh, the capital will find some other places to be efficient on the move. It's not efficient. When it comes to black folks, they overcharge you every time. Why do they overcharge you? Because they can, and it's profitable. And it's a history, and it is rewarded. We have to put an end to this.
Ron from Naperville. What's on your mind today, Ron?
Hi, Santita. Love to say hi. So here's the thing. Yeah, thank you. Kisses. Distance kisses. I am a University of Chicago alumni. Undergrad math. Kudos to me. When we were there,
Greg Palace.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. Yeah, well, here's the thing. It was kind of funny. University of Chicago, which I know you're familiar with because of family and friends, is one of those schools that is known to be very theoretical and practical need not apply. As in, like, we don't have engineering programs. Well, now we do, a bioengineering. And yes, we have professional programs. But it was kind of funny. Everything is first principles. Everything is egghead. Everything is theoretical. So someone with a really great Nobel laureate-filled economics department, we still didn't figure out that there's a way to get your endowment to get bigger. Now, this is not how it works for the traditionally black colleges, historically black colleges. This is not how it's going to work there. But we asked our alumni, hey guys, you're kicking butt. Can you give us some money? This was as crazy as it sounds. That was the pitch. They wanted $500 million to go with their original $500 million. And they wanted to do it over 5 years. After a year and a half, they had $4.5 extra billion. And then they said, well, that was kind of cool. I wonder if we could do that again. And they did it again. Now they've been building. If you notice, Hyde Park from the 90s is radically different than Hyde Park now. So, and that's a case of where you can use your endowment funds to make much bigger awesomeness. But I really like the idea of if a college has an endowment that is crazy. Harvard, a single private institution, has a larger endowment than all of University of California and University of Texas combined.
Well, I mean,
that's the entire state.
I've got 2 minutes. John, just stay right there. Jonathan, he's kicking around a lot of numbers. I mean, because many Black people who go to college today, even today, are first generation college attendees. And if you're not, even if you've got this incredible debt, you can't give. Trying to raise $1 billion at a Black institution would be incredibly hard.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, Jonathan.
Yeah, and thank you for calling in. And if you look at Becker and all these people that have won Nobel laureates, it begs the question: what is the purpose? They say the market is efficient. Efficient where? This empirical evidence shows that's a lie. It was a lie then. It's a lie now. University of Chicago on Midway Plaza, it's right off of Cottage Grove, if you will, south end of the Lakeshore Drive, and not one quarter can roll across the street to 63rd in Cottage Grove from the University of Chicago, and they've got the most Nobel laureate economics. I'm like, this is absolutely foolish. I mean, look at the University of at the Museum of Science and Industry. That we want to take a deeper dive right here on the south end of Lakeshore Drive in the city of Chicago. This is why I think it's very important, and they've not done it yet.
1 minute.
You need a community benefits agreement with the Obama Library before they go and decimate that park and tear it up and give us a traffic nightmare that will further asphyxiate and strangle off the South Side economically. That's building the wall to lock the South Side out the way they have it presently designed. If there's not a community benefits economic agreement, you're not going to see hotels. You're not going to see people stay in their housings. You're going to run up the tax rate and so forth. If the Museum of Science and Industry has 1 million visitors a year, and not one of those dollars comes further south than 57th Street in Hyde Park, it goes to show you dollars don't naturally migrate into these Black neighborhoods. There's an invisible wall like a bad Batman show. So absolutely.
Santita, could I add an item?
Well, during the break you can. We're going to bring Dr. Wolf on.
Wolf
on. Stay right there because we're having some great conversation about the money here, everybody. It's not all equal.
Yep.
You got to make it right. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Max Wolf coming up. Ron, Jonathan, your response.
Hey, Jonathan, you're brilliant. So here's the thing. I would like to
and he's my brother.
Come up with a concept.
Wait a minute. And he's my brother.
He is?
Yeah, this is my baby brother, yes. Well, Jesse, Johnny, and I we're stair-step kids. So,
Okay. Well, lovely. Congrats. And you have an amazing sister. No, a breath of fresh air. No, a breath of fresh air that could wipe away 4 years of dread. I mean, oh, wow. So let me get, before the break ends, let me just give this idea. You know how we have the concept of sister cities? So Naperville has some crazy place in Lithuania, Latvia, and a few other places. I believe that marketing is the most important thing we can do as humans to get our story, to see what other people see. Obama's right. You've got to walk in someone else's shoes, see things from their eyes. So Harvard's got a problem. They got $30 billion. They're not going to buy all of Cambridge and Boston. But if they affiliated with Howard and a couple others, and do you know how much marketing that would be for Harvard to be a partner with historically Black colleges and to put that down as part of their social correctness program? That's what I would say is pimp, I hate to say it, but pimp, sell the idea of finding sister universities.
We have Dr. Wolf.
I just think it makes more sense. Dr. Wolf, you with us?
Yes, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, look, you know this is your segment. I've got Jonathan Jackson. We've been talking about these.
Good morning, Doc.
Hey, Dr. Wolf. I am a fan of and familiar with the other Dr. Jackson. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Wolf.
Is that hilarious? Is
My
he
leader?
a hoot? Is he a hoot? Well, you know what we were talking about before we bring on Dr. Wolf. We were talking, Dr. Wolf, about HBCUs paying 20% more for bonds because investors are less willing to invest in Black institutions. And so Jonathan was helping to break that down. As
was higher Ron. Interest rate.
Yeah. As was Ron from Naperville. So
normally if you want to lower effective bond rate and subsidize something, you can do a state or federal wrapper, which might make a lot of sense in this case. In other words, you get a backstop from a public institution, a development group, or state, as in one of the 50 U.S. states or the federal government. And that can be very helpful because it effectively lowers the rate and it signals the social commitment. And to the extent that the underlying is creditworthy, which you'd hope in this case it would be, you would probably wouldn't end up having to spend any public money. You'd just be on the hook if there was a misadventure.
Jonathan? Johnny, are you still there?
No, absolutely. And that is
30.
That is one great idea, and you're going to hear more. And I think talking about Max, I had tied in earlier that there's a familiar song here in a very simple melody on overcharging African Americans. It's in the auto market, it's in the credit market, it's in the mortgage market, and this is another example with the bonds and the HBCUs and how you go to communist China and communist Russia, U.S. investors
5.
Look, those same institutions, African American institutions, with the same currency, the same language in your same state. That the money's not rational.
Hold on, I'm coming up. This is a great conversation.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Santita Jackson Show. Boy, we've had a wonderful time today. We've been talking about diabetes and what we can do to prevent it and mitigate it with Dr. Deborah Verholden and Dr. Ivan Walks, former Commissioner of Public Health for Washington, D.C. And, of course, we've been talking with Jonathan Jackson about HBCUs and the challenges that they have, even with their great record. I mean, boy, the game changers in American society have really come out of HBCUs, everybody. They pay more for bonds because investors are less willing to invest in Black institutions, even with their high rate of return upon the society. And then we're talking with Dr. Max Wolf. We've been having an interesting conversation. Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push, is still with us. But, of course, it's bottom of the hour on Thursday. You know what that means. It's Dr. Max Wolf time on the Santita Jackson Show. And we've been talking about really this, I guess you've turned this into an economic segment, Dr. Wolf, because it does impact all parts of our lives. We're looking at it. We're looking at inflation. We're looking at a labor shortage, which you said is just a wage shortage. We're looking at a lot of injustice here that's driving a lot of economic insecurity. That's what we've been talking about. We were talking about it in the last segment during the break and now. So I would like to hear from you. We've got housing is more and more, home ownership is out of reach for increasing numbers of Americans. I mean, please, renting an apartment in the city in which you work becoming very, very difficult. And inflation, as we're reopening the economy, is making it worse. Food costs more. Your housing costs more. What is going on here?
Well, I mean, partly whenever we talk about the general cost of life issues and how much life costs, we have to understand that we're talking a lot about the cost of housing, since it's the single largest component in how we do the indexes, right? So if there's a move in the price of housing, it has a tendency to exert a pretty big push into the overall statistics. Likewise for transport, where we have a pretty large total weight in the inflation indicators, that's in the cost of transportation, right? So when you have a spike in the price of housing and a spike in the price of motor vehicles and gasoline coming together, which we do, then you end up having a pretty big spike in these numbers, particularly because the numbers we're getting now are being compared to 1 year ago, right? Which is, depending on how recent the numbers are, kind of April or May 2020, which was the trough of despair around COVID. So you have a couple things happening. You have features that are a very large weight in what we call inflation tallies, housing and transport costs, coming against a very, very weak benchmark, right? So year over year. So there's a few things happening. I don't think we have a huge generalized inflation, but I think it's, probably more than time to bring that up. And then the other thing we kind of have is some economic recovery at the same time as there's massive stimulus, okay? And the way we've decided to stimulate the economy is top heavy, and it's monetary policy. So for 30, 40 years, we've been having this sort of anti-government fiscal policy intervention where the idea is always lower taxes and have the government do less. So we don't directly support people and communities, although that tends to be what we call pro-poor impact growth. We have this, we make it cheaper to borrow money. The problem is that high-income people then borrow money for very little that's designed to subsidize the economy and make speculative investments in luxury real estate, fine art, stocks, bonds, venture capital companies. And so the people who help wealthy people get wealthier do really well, and wealthy people do really, really, really well, and everybody else kind of navel gazes on it and is encouraged to take on more debt, which can be problematic if their employment is increasingly kind of gig economy employment, where there's a lot of uncertainty around the income flows because, you're kind of an at-will employee who has limited visibility into whether or not how much money you'll be making, if any, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months out, but you're borrowing for, potentially a long time frame. So you sort of have the social mismatch, which we aggravate when we try to help.
Well, so what do you think of what Larry Summers has said? I'd like to hear what you've got to say, and I think Jonathan is still there. He says, I think policy is rather overdoing it. A sense of serenity and complacency being projected by the economic policymakers that this is all something that can be easily managed is misplaced. He's speaking, of course, of these $1 trillion packages that the president is trying to get through to give us some relief. People do need relief. Who's thinking it's misplaced? Secretary Summers or the president's or what? Because people need help.
I don't know if you're addressing that largely to Dr. Jackson or to myself, so I don't want to answer his question.
No. To you. Jonathan can jump in, but I need to find out from you.
Okay, so look, Secretary Summers is making what is largely a technical argument about whether the proposals taken in toto from the Biden administration are too aggressive. And he's kind of reminding everybody that he is part of the Democratic community that was able to do things that were pro-growth without tipping us over into inflation. He has some concerns about the amount of borrowing. From a technical basis or an historical or modeling basis, he's right. We ran, not under Biden, under his predecessor, the Donald, a $3 trillion budget deficit in 2020, which is staggering, right? It's literally 6 times the numbers that were themselves staggering, right? So it is outlandish. However, clearly we don't have a global pandemic that slams the economy to a halt and kills 1 million of our fellow citizens every year, thankfully. So it was kind of an unprecedented moment. We certainly don't usually have that, having had ruinous tax cuts that we refuse to repeal. Thank you, the Donald. And also mismanage the economy as badly as he's mismanaged every property he's ever had, right? So what I said 5 years ago, I'll tell you now. Show me a guy who's 70 years old who's failed at everything he's ever done. I'll tell you how he's going to do the next 5 years. I'm very comfortable with that. Even though forecasting is tricky, that one I can do, right? Right? This is not difficult. This is the doctor who tells you, hey, I noticed every time you drink a glass of milk, your face turns red and you pass out. And then the guy goes to a yogurt eating contest. Like I know how the story ends, right? But that notwithstanding, he has achieved the same miracle for the U.S. that he's achieved for all of his own businesses, right? Which isn't surprising since he doesn't care about the country. He cared about his own businesses, and he still failed at all those, right? So unsurprisingly, we had a pretty catastrophic series of messes, many of which were not Donald's fault. To be honest, many of which were a long time coming. He just made them worse and ignored them. And then there was coronavirus, which is absolutely not the fault of Donald Trump, but he happened to have the sort of misfortune of being the president when that happened. And that's, again, not on him. That's a historical global event. It would be unfair to lay at his feet, right, just to be fair. But so we had a series of forced and unforced errors coming at the same time, so perhaps. But it is hard to look at a country that is as indebted as we are, right? So we now have our debt well above the 90% of GDP, which economists usually look to as a warning sign, right? Where you're getting to a point of debt where your indebtedness makes your economy more crisis prone and fragile and slows your growth. So former Secretary Summers is absolutely correct about that. Having run a $3 trillion deficit last year, setting yourself up to run a multi-trillion-dollar deficit potentially this year, while it kind of makes sense, given the moment that doesn't make sense, is dangerous. And we are long overdue for some conversations about running up bills that we then drop on the future, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is an issue. He is not incorrect. I think, unfortunately, a conversation that doesn't really, per se, focus in the same area was quickly used as a political bludgeon by people who wanted to advocate for or against various policies, mostly by folks who were nervous about the size of the infrastructure plan proposed by Joe Biden, which I think is worth having a discussion, and anything Joe Biden suggests isn't necessarily correct, and nothing should be taken without scrutiny. That being said, we have, unfortunately, a wing in the Republican Party that's pretty powerful here, who's decided that basically blocking all legislation from Democratic presidents and then screaming and yelling that they need to elect Republicans because nothing is getting through has been a winning strategy. And if that's a political strategy, fine. I guess maybe it works for the Republican Party or a group in the Republican Party. It's bad for America, and it's economically irrelevant, and it's insulting to pretend it's an economic theory. Well, we can agree or disagree about economic theories, but I hope you fail because I'm from the other party. Whatever party you're in, that's not an economic theory. And it's insulting to the audiences and to the economists who are asked to answer these questions, I think, as though they're real.
Jonathan, how do you respond? I mean, you see a lot of pain out here every day.
You know, Santita, and to piggyback on what Dr. Wolf was saying, the economy is a human being, if you will. It's a whole body. If something in your foot is hurt, you know, it signals something in your brain, and likewise in your hand, in your wrist, and blood flow. It all has to connect. How do we put money in the average American's pocket? How do people survive? And I do not believe that there is a bunch of lazy people here, but the way they have knee-jerked and say, we're just going to pump some money in the economy, that you can't ask someone to go to work when their wages are still low and the government is doing something more responsible and putting a higher wage in their pocket. So there have been some miscalculations. And some of this, Santita, you can't figure out until you start the engine and hear if it knocks. Like, you got to, put it out there. We need to have a massive transformation of the U.S. economy. Our transportation costs are very high on the average citizen. Child care is very expensive on the average citizen. I think personally broadband should be free, that it should be a right for the average citizen. You can't tell people that are asking for government services to go online, and there's no means for you by which to go online to procure your services. And I think this would be a great time as they pass around these trillions of dollars to look at how do we transform the U.S. economy. And particularly when you start at the top of your segment off on HBCUs, the black colleges that are overpaying their interest on the bonds, how do we pull up the African-American community as we look at Tulsa that has had some very peculiar attacks on it economically, socially, politically? How do we have this as a transformative moment? These institutions need some tax preferences in order to fight the stigma and the history of discrimination in the capital markets so that capital can flow into these institutions? How do we build up our workforce and transform these cities and move people closer to rail lines and apartments that they can afford or housing they can afford so they're connected to mass transit? There's a long history of discrimination in mass transportation here in the city of Chicago. The entire South Side does not have access to the train, but our Chicago transit system goes into Skokie, Illinois, Evanston, Illinois, goes into white neighborhoods. Same thing happened in Atlanta. Same thing has happened in D.C. We need to transform mass transportation. And just because they passed the stimulus bill, same thing they did in the Obama administration, African Americans got less than 1% of that infrastructure spending money in the state of Illinois. It has to be tied to African American businesses and inclusion as well.
I mean, because how do we move the conversation to that which is fair and sustainable, Dr. Wolf? I mean, because one of the stories that you shared with me is that the U.S. labor shortage is just a wage shortage. And it seems that people are pushing back against the unfairness. The economy, I don't think you said some weeks ago that the economy and the world that we're returning to is not the world we left in 2020. I mean, it seems so much has changed in 2021. Yeah, please explain.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, look, the hospitality industry seems to be suffering, particularly. I think we know what that's about. Now, there might be some wage pressure. I'm not saying there's none, right? I'm saying but it's a very small piece of the story, right? So I think that the wages on offer are very low, and they don't account for the fact that we still have half our population unvaccinated. Many jurisdictions don't have any coherent policy. They don't have any masking. They don't have any indoor masking, and they're back to full capacity. So asking somebody to make $4 an hour, dealing with a public that might be cranky and difficult after their long experiment in mental ill health for a year, with the possibility of being dead at the end of the month for $5, $6 an hour, might be a tough sell. But I'm not sure that's
I'm sorry,
just
Dr.
a feature of.
I love your mind. Yeah. You have the most colorful analogies. I would love to be in your class, man. I'd probably get kicked out for laughing too much. You just hit me.
No, you're nice.
You make economics exciting. You make economics exciting.
Give it a shot. That's kind of you. Yeah, but I think that could be an issue on a recruitment basis. I think we also know that children and older people, the care of children and older people, very, very disproportionately falls on women, prime working age women. And there has been no real end of that for a lot of people, right? So you're going into the summer months where often childcare duties are enhanced by a lack of in-person schooling. We've had a lot of lack of in-person schooling and also just a lot of lack of visibility. So even if your kids are in school, right, not so clear under what conditions the school might be shut down temporarily or go back to remote only, which means you have to have childcare, which is expensive. And keep in mind, since childcare costs more than low-wage jobs make, we are asking people to do something unusual there, possibly, which is go underwater for the privilege of working in the service industry, also problematic. And then we have a lot of older people. And, older people's care also tends to fall disproportionately on women, right? And there's a lot of reasonable fears about nursing homes and older age facilities, residential facilities, given that they were quite badly hit by COVID, right? And continue to be populations that are somewhat vulnerable, the elderly, particularly if they're elderly and have one or more comorbidities or underlying conditions. And the other thing we can see is a lot of the missing labor force is female. And a lot of the missing labor force is female and or in Black and Hispanic communities that were disproportionately hit by COVID. So I think when you start breaking this stuff down, I'm not sure if this national wage strike to have a higher minimum wage, but even if it were, what the market would normally be interpreted to be telling you is that perhaps the prevailing wage on offer in some of these industries is insufficient to get people to work. And obviously there's two things you can do about that, right? You can make their unemployment more brutal and horrifyingly impoverishing. That's a suggestion from some of our Christian brothers. Or you could decide to pay someone enough that they would voluntarily go to work, even absent facing a bottomless pit of horrors if they don't. Right? So there's not just sticks, there's carrots. And that's a social debate, carrot and stick.
No, I mean, look, pardon Jonathan's laughing, but this is my brother. I think I know him kind of well. Why are you laughing, Johnny? Is it because common sense ain't
It's
funny?
just,
What?
well, Dr. Max Wolf is so practical. Usually you talk economics. I love your show. It's so broad, it's so general, so theoretical. Do you want to make more milkshakes or missiles? Like, it's just, I mean, like, whether it's supply and demand, whatever. But anyway, he put such color and life into what the true study of economics is cooperation amongst all these people and bodies, and it's macro and it's micro, it gives and it takes. So it's fluid, and he's so lucid and so clear on himself. I learned so much listening to Dr. Wolf.
Very kind of you.
And Santita, and so some of what you cannot anticipate all the parts of the economy. You can forecast, and then after you get out of a model, after there's a prototype and a production of a car, once it hits the ground, then you really know what's happening. So sometimes you have to say, "Oh, I made a mistake. This is what I thought would happen," but people actually chose to do something different. Same thing happens with these families. Our family structures are fundamentally changing as we speak. We're in a generation now where people in the prime of their life are having to assist with the care for their elder parents, and we also have to assist with the care of our children. So one part you're seeing manifest that, if you could say, is a crisis, meaning something that could be almost unanticipated, is that there's a group in the middle in their prime that's being stretched like we've not seen before. If you look at pictures in the 50s and people that were working, one man working could support a stay-at-home wife and their children and family, and even a laborer could end up having a weekend and a summer home in Michigan. That world is over. And some of the models we're talking about are reverting back to the 50s and the 40s and some theories that were foolish then that aren't holding today. So we need to see, one of the people you don't hear about, you certainly didn't hear about in the previous administration, there used to be economists that used to talk about the economy. Now people just do a knee-jerk reaction, just say taxes cut, taxes paid. It's an argument. It's really sad.
But you know what, Jonathan? I will say this: we're not talking over you, Dr. Wolf, but I'd love to see you with the economic advisors for the president. I mean, because you.
I mean, the president does have some good economic advisors, a few of whom I know well, actually. I mean, that doesn't mean that they're better than the ones I don't know, obviously.
Well, no, I mean, but I think you bring, as Jonathan was saying, you bring a lucidity. And really, it's you sound like you're one of us, right? That means a lot. And I'm not downing anyone who are any people. I know, we all know a lot of these people who are serving on these councils and on these task forces, and they're great people. But you need more voices. You need some people who sound like they understand what the problems are down here on the ground, what the challenges are.
And you need some people that really do understand, like Dr. Wolf, not just people that sound like it. Yeah. Dr. Wolf really does understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had these weird discussion that economics is this specialized field that requires a lot of study, which is true. Okay, and I went to grad school like all the rest of these guys and women, although still disproportionately male for a bunch of reasons. But the men and women in this business. But the basic, look, poor people know basic economics really well because if they don't, they die. So there's this kind of basic story here that we can build off of, right? Which is everyone who faces too much month at the end of the money, kind of every month, has all kinds of elaborate economic things they do. Are they all wise and optimal? Probably not, but they're doing a lot, so they're thinking about it a lot. And we know the stress of having low income is killing a significant portion of people, or at least making them less healthy and bringing them to a premature conclusion. So we know it's on the mind, right? And the point is, not everything is common sense, and the best of common sense is trained, so that, we can get the benefit of all the scholars who've come before and the work they've done and the research they do. But we know we're making decisions. And I think a lot of the things we think or have been trained to think are political squabbles are actually economic discussions of social priority, i.e., how do we get people back to work? Pay them more or take away their benefits. That's a legitimate debate. And there are real points that could be made on either side and real consequences to the side you choose, right? That's not a partisan squabble, but it's sold that way often, right? Also, you can't just raise wages on everything. You have to be able to produce something where you can make a profit on selling it to break even and pay your employees and pay your rent and pay your taxes and be a part of the community. So there are some real constraints, right? But it feels to me like a lot of these debates about taxes and spending have shed their rational container. So you got people who think you can just tax billionaires and solve every social problem out there, and that doesn't work, however appealing it is. And it's not terribly well rooted in reality. And then you have folks out there who think that, you just have to make sure that somebody couldn't possibly have anything other than the most horrifying existence if they don't work at whatever wage somebody wants to offer them, right? Which also doesn't work. And then the last thing I'd say, which I think gets lost, which I try to bring back, not always successfully, but try, is there is no separation between the economy and the politics. That's a fantasy of dividing departments in an academic setting, right? So every economic decision is political, and every political decision is economic. And that's not a taint on politics or economics. That's the complexity that is reality. Because economics is about, who produces. Yeah, it's who produces and how do we distribute our social wealth. I can't imagine something more interesting to most people or more laced through with our politics.
Everybody, wow, what a lesson. I'm with you, Jonathan. He'd make me enjoy economics.
You can ask my son. I feel like they might give me a harsher review.
Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push, and every Thursday here on the Santita Jackson Show, Dr. Max Wolf, helping us to understand where we are, everybody, economically, politically, socially, culturally. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Tulsa. So
30.
That too was an economic decision to drop a bomb. Thank you, Gap Band, on the black citizens.
Please, invite me on for tomorrow, Santita. I'm going to crash your show tomorrow. Please.
I want you to be on. Please, if I get Dr. Wolf, I'd have him on too. Because it's going to be a great show. It's going to be a good show to talk about.
10.
Tells everybody. In the meantime, Dr. Wolf, I love you. Jonathan, I love you. And everybody.
Thank you both. Thanks to the audience out there.
Oh, I love you. And they love you too. Teaching us all day, every day. And the great Wolf, this is Dr. Richard Wolf's son. Yeah. Love you, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. I am still on Facebook, but I want you all to be able to say goodbye to everybody, or make your closing thoughts. Give us your closing thoughts. Jonathan?
Hey, we're off the air now, right?
No, well, we're on Facebook Live, but I can come off Facebook Live. So
great. No.
Okay.
Hey, Santita, great show. Dr. Wolf, as always, you're amazing. Keep up the great work.
Thanks. Hope everything's okay. You guys are well. Look, I think you're going to get this economic debate come in the fall in a much more kind of forceful manner, because some of the bloom will come off the rose here in terms of the recovery and the COVID cessation. And right, because I think part of the problem is we've been deciding this thing is over since it started because we don't know how to deal with it, with COVID and the COVID recession, and totally understandable on a human level. Terrible economic policy. Deciding you don't have a problem because it's really hard to handle, totally understandable, never ends that well, right? So I think we're going to have to work that out a little bit, right? This is I'm a fan of the analogy, which is famous from before my time, but I guess kind of timeless, which is there's a line in The Young Frankenstein, the Mel Brooks film, where he says, I'm a talented surgeon. He's talking to the hunchback, and he says, I can help you with that hump. The guy goes, what hump? Right? And so in economics, we call it the what hump. Right? When you've pointed out to somebody, hey, I can help you with that hump, and the guy looks you dead in the eyes, completely earnest, no humor in the voice, and tells you, hey, man, what hump? Right? And at that point, it's going to be a rougher run, right? And if you're going as a consultant, this is the thing you deal with, right? Because you sort of like, hey, we can help you with that hump. And then the guy's like, hey, I don't know what you're smoking. There's no hump here, right? And that's when you get that resume spiffed up and you start looking for the next gig. But in this case, when it's a macro economy, you can't really do that. So, yeah, I mean, there's some concern there, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. I do think that the political mood of the general public is to the left of the discussion and the punditry. I think that may have been true for a bunch of years because I think the punditry lurched right as much as it felt it had to accommodate Trump and the kind of Trumpists. And they're real, and there's a lot of them, maybe a third of the country or more. But I don't think it's where the country's at. If you look at the sort of urban or diverse segments of the country, which we still, again, socially discuss the diverse community as though it's like a small marginal community, but it is both massive today and the majority tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think also maybe update some of these ideas that no longer comport to demographic or social realities, right? Like we talk about urban populations, but yeah, I mean, between the immediate suburbs and the cities, we're talking about more than half the people who live in the country. Not as represented in Congress, which is another story, but in terms of who actually lives in this country, it's not some rounding error. So I think we're going to have to reckon with that.
That we're
and Santita, when you talk about some economics and practicality, I don't know why I got an idea. Trump was on a mission to dismantle parts of the government. So for example, when Dr. Wolf says about poor people are great economists because they have to be, they understand how to stretch a dollar. The tax return money has not started flowing. So a lot of things are off. People that have worked have not gotten their tax refunds, which gives a shot in the arm to cell phone sales, to mattresses, furniture, people move. So although there's this unemployment money that's moving around and some stimulus money that's moving around and some fraudulent PPP money that is beginning to evaporate, a lot of people haven't gotten their legitimate tax return money yet.
Good luck.
And so unemployment too. I mean, I think we don't talk about this. So it's a great point, but also a lot of people are eligible for and have applied for unemployment in various states. And those systems were under-maintained and under-invested in. And they were totally overwhelmed come March and April. And so lots of people are waiting for all kinds of unemployment that they're probably eligible for. They may have even done the paperwork for, but there are tons of recertification complexities. And I think we're hitting a wall of recertifications because normally you have to recertify every year. And because of when everybody lost their job in the initial shutdowns, we're around those anniversaries of people filing, right? Because everybody was kind of getting terminated in March and April, and they're now having to recertify because it's a year later. And I think we're seeing disruptions to the flow of those unemployment checks to pretty vulnerable individuals and communities. So I think there's starting to be some issues there, separate apart from the issues about, some recent decisions that would cut off aid to some of the gig workers and some others who were made temporarily eligible for federal unemployment assistance and hadn't been previously at the state and federal level.
Jonathan?
And Santita, the translation of that is crime will spike. Money's not flowing. I see it. I see it.
Oh my God.
But I mean, that's also a big deal because if crime spikes, and there has been a pretty big increase in crime in a lot of cities anyway. I mean, I know Brooklyn, where I live, we've had some of a resurgence of kind of things we had thought were from the last millennium, literally, that we had sort of done better on since 2000. But
for example, what, Dr. Wolf? You say
in Brooklyn we have
millennium of what? You sound like you're like using a fancy term for some crime that's just gotten jacked up.
Yeah, so we started we don't have a car culture, but partly because of fears about public transit here. We've had a lot more people, driving and buying vehicles. That's been true, the whole pandemic. But we're starting to have more carjacking. Since we don't have cars, we don't carjack that much. And that was kind of throwback to the bad old 90s. More shootings. Again, I don't want to make it sound worse than it is, because that's not a service to anyone, but more kind of a tick up to some extent, at least in the perception of subway crime in our subway system, which New York doesn't work unless the subway works. Just a fact of life in the city. And then the sort of petty theft, which was pretty, I mean, it was always there, but it was a little bit under control, seems like. I mean, if you have an Amazon package and you actually get it, it feels like you won the lottery in New York now.
Are you serious?
We all have cameras, and it's sort of the weekly, like, okay, who got the vitamins? It's gotten kind of, I mean, Amazon's nice about it, and I think if you're in relatively good standing and you have video, they'll often send you the thing again, and you hope that this time you get it. But yeah, it's become a bit of a sport to see which packages you order that you get if you're not right on it.
You see,
yeah,
this was my point. He's talking about a resurgence of past customary economic interactions for transportation. Like
I'll tell you the one that got me, because I grew up here.
The
stories about someone stealing your shoes in the subway.
Someone stealing
I
your
grew
shoes
up
in the subway? What?
Yeah, like that was a thing we grew up with. Like you'd get mugged for your shoes. I mean, it was not obviously, it's not like sophisticated organized crime that does that, right? But people get, I'm not talking about some shoes you just bought. That's some suburban fantasy. I'm talking about the ones on your feet, right? So we used to call that shoe jack.
Shoe jack.
Yeah. But like, it is possible that happened throughout, and I was blissfully ignorant of it because it's my cushy lifestyle. Possible, but yeah, it seems like it's kind of come back. That one, the two that I was, they're really quality of life.
That's like the original
life and death.
That's like the
homeless guy sleeping in my car. Yeah, these were like the 80s, 90s things when I was a little kid that, we associated with New York. It certainly was not part of our charm offensive as a city to get tourists. But, hey, there seems to be a guy sleeping in my car and someone trying to steal someone's shoes. These were not like, I always interpret those perhaps as an economist. But, yeah, those are probably not awesome macro indicators of economic health.
Right, where someone simply asks you to walk out of your shoes. You're like, excuse me, I'm going to need you to step out of those shoes. It's like somebody taking somebody's horse. Like, no, I'm going to need those shoes. Do you see what's in my pocket? Move.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, again, I don't want to make it sound bad or deter people from coming to visit us as tourists. When the tourists are back, the fancy neighborhoods happen. This stuff happens quite a bit less. It's not an epidemic. They're trying to frighten anyone here, but yeah, we're starting to see some of that. Now, there's a big debate in New York, just to be fair, between how much of this is like resurgent crime and how much of it is a real deterioration since the protests after George Floyd, in many cases, between the relationship between the police and the communities they police. Right? So it isn't 100% clear that we're just seeing the cops feel like they're going to be blamed or be angry and therefore be a little bit less aggressive in carrying out their duties. There are a lot of folks in New York who are making that point too. I don't have the answer. I will say this. I walk across the Brooklyn Bridge pretty frequently, and at both ends of the bridge are stationed police in their vehicles, and they must not be the world's most observant people, because it is not legal to ride your motorcycle on the pedestrian walkway across the Brooklyn Bridge. But I have not been on the bridge, and I'm on there 2 or 3 times a week without seeing somebody riding their motorcycle at a pretty high rate of speed through the terrified mass of tourists and people walking on the bridge. And I feel like, how does this motorcycle get on the bridge without going by the police on both ends? And it is at least clear that there may be a lack of super zealous enforcement of the no motorcycles on pedestrian bridge. So to offer one anecdote, and like, that's sort of funny, but it's also sad because that story will be on the front page of the newspaper because at some point one of these guys is going to run someone over, right?
Yeah.
Probably a little kid or an old person who's slow to get out of the way. So yeah, I mean, obviously bringing your racing bike through the thick pedestrian throngs on the bridge is perhaps not the most civic-minded activity.
With your helmet on and your earbuds, you don't give a damn about nobody.
Well, you see these other guys. I don't know if you guys have this in Chicago as well, but it's fun for some of these guys. They have these helmets with the dreadlocks attached to them to look like the Predator guy from the movie Predator. So it's a kind of an odd look. It looks sort of like a sci-fi character at a high rate of speed coming down the Brooklyn Bridge on a fluorescent colored 750cc motorbike, which just feels like something you'd notice if you were policing the bridge closely. Also, the entire bridge is under surveillance. So, I mean, there should be like a lot of video of this. And again, like I don't hang out on the bridge or anything. I'm just walking to Manhattan back and forth from Brooklyn, and I live near there, so it's easy to get there that way. It's a beautiful bridge. It's well maintained. In fairness, it's always clean and no trash, and it's a nice place to take a walk. But yeah, it's even nicer if no one is using it as a racetrack.
While you're on it.
And just to remind out-of-town folks, there's a toll-free road right below where we're walking, where you are supposed to be if you're in a motorized vehicle.
Oh, Max. Well, first of all, I want you to know, between you and Jonathan, you talk about a treat. I love you guys. You all are so brilliant and you're so silly. Oh my gosh.
Hopefully you'll still have me on the show after I'm hit by one of these bikes.
Max, don't you joke. This is terrible. Are the police?
No, I pay attention.
Well, are they like? Is this like defund the police, or what is it? Why are people not? Why?
No, it's not a protest. These are just people trying to. These are just guys getting across the bridge faster. I've seen people yell at them. Right? It is New York. We're not necessarily known for being quiet and keeping our opinions to ourselves in this town, including in Brooklyn. So people do share all kinds of aggressive critiques with these guys as they zoom around. So, but not always the best adjusted community. I'm not sure the most productive, repeatable conversations ensue in all cases. They got a guy like a few months ago, banged him up a little bit. So somebody knocked him off the bike. But I think they often get through, and sometimes they come in little groups, I guess, a couple of guys. A fair number of them, I think, seem like, which I'm sure is true of any city, but let's call them mental health casualties of whatever, including possibly the last year, which is a non-trivial number of folks. They're not shy either. They're out and about, especially on a nice warm spring day, sharing whatever their pathologies are with all of us. So some of these folks might be, somewhat short of a portrait mental health.
Oof. Wow. What? I
do think the country has a mental health crisis that's quite serious that has to be reckoned with. Just because it was so hard for so many people. And this is not to belittle this or poke fun. I think there's a second pandemic here that, again, has to be very addressable, very understandable. But a lot of people, just like we're not coming out into the same world that we left before everything started getting locked down, the people coming out, they're not the same. And for a lot of folks, it was a year of fear and isolation and loss, none of which or much of which may not have been adequately processed. They didn't have the support. It wasn't so easy to do, or they were self-medicating to get through the year with, substances or alcohol or whatever, or, QAnon. And what's coming out the other side, some folks might need a little bit of help.
Oh, don't you give Marjorie a pass. Don't you dare.
Well, I'm not just talking about Congress, which always has its mental health challenges. I mean the general public.
Don't you give Marjorie a pass. Don't you sit up here and do that.
We don't know each other, so I have not had the chance to meet her.
You haven't? Me either. That's all right. I'm good.
I'm not from Georgia, so I don't get down to Georgia that often. And I do have friends in Atlanta. I think she's probably not from Atlanta, or is she? What's not her district?
I try not to pay attention. I mean, you talk. Whew.
She seems to have a spat with one of our Congress people, with AOC, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, she wants to pull. I think have a restraining order or something like that. I'm like, come on.
Well, there's an exchange of some kind of personal threat at some point, right? It seems like something tough.
My thing is, don't give her that much daylight. Alexandra, just stop it. Don't do that. Don't give.
Let me ask you this.
That much air.
I didn't follow the story.
Quick question, Dr. Wolf. It just seems like and I don't like to go into the conspiracy stuff, but it doesn't seem like
do you want me to come
when
off
the Democrats get in.
Do you want me to come off of Facebook now?
No.
Okay.
No, you don't have to. It seems like the prices just started rising.
Place for conspiracies. Are you kidding me? If we're going to do anything conspiracy or misinformation, Facebook will be angry if you don't do it on the platform. Come on.
Yeah, it's like
I don't want you to lose your show.
Rising prices. These gas prices have gone up substantially. I've seen pork go up 40%. I mean, like the electricity bills are going up. I'm like, this is really strange. You know, like you didn't hear a word about gas prices in 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously oil and oil prices were beat up really badly by the downturn and by an expectation of substantially lower demand, right? And at the same time, there has been some forward motion politically and some scientifically, actually, in the electric vehicle world and the battery world, which is key, right? So figuring out batteries better is pretty key to getting to a more sustainable energy future, right? But as you saw, even the rulings against ExxonMobil and Shell today around the world, the world is becoming a sort of tougher more hostile to carbon-based fuels for climate reasons and pollution reasons, among others. And also there's been a march forward in both public support for and the technological evolution of alternative energy. So that has had a tough impact on the oil and gas space, which has seen a bit of a resurgence, in part because of the pipeline, although that's mostly behind us, but just a general sense of we are still an oil and gas internal combustion engine society, probably will be for quite some time. However quickly we try to get off of it, it'll still be quite some time. And so there was kind of a resurgence in demand, and that pushed up the oil and gas prices, which you're seeing. In terms of some of the agricultural prices, I think there was just stoppages and shortages, right? So we have these very fragile supply chains, and the pandemic can really shake up the supply chain. So whether it's like the supply chain around housing, which is pushing up the cost of housing, among other things, but it's pushing up the cost of housing because building supplies are in short supply, or just these disruptions to production, right? So you're seeing that, I think, in some of the meat prices. You see that for sure in the housing prices. The auto space is really wild, where the used car prices have spiked and new cars are having all kinds of delays and difficulties because the chips that are going, the microchips that are such an important part of the modern vehicle weren't ordered, because during the long pandemic, people hunkered down and canceled all their orders. And then when demand picked up very quickly, they weren't able to do it. They weren't able to match the production. So you have more money chasing these items than you have items, whether that's, certain meats or gasoline or vehicles or new homes, constructed homes or apartments, that you get this pricing pressure. So you are seeing that. And, there's lots of government stimulus from the fiscal side, and the interest rates remain extremely low. So lots of demand and inadequate supply.
And about 2 years ago, I was buying 2x4s at about $1.68. Now they're almost $7. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I think the full spike will come down. I don't think that's the new price, right? That's a temporary thing about rebuilding. But if you have the coinciding of the end of a really, really long period where you can't do construction, with the winter falling into spring, right, with a general lack of inventory, and those things are all kind of occurring together now, everyone's racing to build and renovate, and lots of people moving to the burbs and wanting to do all kinds of new things with their housing, and the supply disruption, you're going to have the kind of perfect storm. So all the building material costs, obviously 2x4s being a classic building material, they've had heavy pressure. I don't know so much about the specifics in the meat space, but there's a bunch. And then there was just all kinds of agricultural labor disruptions. By the way, some of those predate COVID, because the newer and more aggressive immigration policies that started coming in before COVID and then were really, really done during COVID have disrupted the agricultural production in the U.S. because American agricultural production still relies quite heavily on migrant labor. And if you disrupt the ability of those folks to move around or to get to their workplaces, then obviously you're going to have an issue. And then last thing maybe to mention is part of what's going on in the job market is that when you have a pandemic that shifts how people live and where they live and puts kind of the housing on suspended animation for a year, you just have these frictional mismatches. A lot of people are in apartments that they didn't pay rent on or didn't pay all the rent on all the time, and or living in houses that they didn't pay all the mortgage on all the time, trying to figure out what that means for the future. And those people are stuck. So they can't go somewhere else. And the reason that matters to the job market so much is that you get a lot of what we call frictional unemployment, which is there may be jobs and there may be people who want that job, but particularly if they're immobilized by other issues with the pandemic, they can't go from area A, where they are looking for a job and not finding one, to area B, where there's a job looking for someone to fill it and not finding that, right? So that's when people aren't free to move around, which COVID created as an issue, it's much harder for jobs to get filled, i.e. there might be a lot of jobs in places people left in large numbers, right, that they haven't gotten back to yet. So there's a lot of sort of frictional issues happening because that's what I mean. We constantly forget just how large of a dislocation the pandemic was for so many people, where they lived, how they lived, who they lived with, how many people per unit, urban, rural, suburban, right? So a lot of things churned up, right? Students not in colleges and universities and grad schools, foreign individuals who work here, who went home, who couldn't come back. Non-citizens who couldn't or didn't come back, who work here and or live here and or are consumers here, right? So this is a lot of dislocation still.
Oh, wow. I mean, there are so many moving parts here.
Think about an economy as the sum total of several million enterprises making decisions, thousands of federal, state, and local agencies making decisions and enacting policies, the federal government making decisions and enacting policies, and 160 million households and employees making decisions and interacting just internally, and then our interactions with the other 6.5 billion people on the globe and all the other 200 countries that we have some economic interaction with, right? It's a pretty complex system of interactions between people and governments and enterprises and not-for-profits, and all of that gets affected by shutdowns and disease and shifting populations and shifting population health. And that's the last one, and then I probably need to go, but the health of the American public is materially different than it was a year ago. We already spend 15+% of our GDP on healthcare. We're already an aging society. We don't know how big or how long we'll be dealing with COVID, but it will change the medical cost for America and for American households in profound ways, especially because we know that a non-trivial portion of people who have a moderate to severe COVID case have symptoms still 3 months after. And we don't know what that's going to mean for life expectancies and other cancers and health issues. And we're still going to have outbreaks, and we still have almost half our population that hasn't received any vaccines, right? So hopefully the worst is behind us, but this by no means over.
And we need to not act as if this is over, because I think that's part of the big problem here. People are behaving as if it's over. And because they've been told effectively it's over, and it's not. It is not.
It's a temptation, right? It's probably in our nature. Thinking we survived something awful and can go on with our lives is comforting, and people very reasonably want to feel that way, which is totally understandable. The problem is, you can't. However understandable it is, you can't do it.
And things don't happen like that. That's bewitched. Things just don't happen like that. It's a process. It's a process. And certainly, I think, our understanding of all of this is a process. And so I think that we should proceed with caution, and we're not doing that. And that makes me very uneasy, very uneasy.
I mean, I hear people talk about the PTSD analogy, and it may end up being a good one, which is you send people to war, they come back, they survive, there's a relief, right?
Yeah.
But some few weeks, months later, often they realize that to survive, your body kind of goes on automatic pilot, and that's good. That gets you through it. But, at some point when you have survived, you begin to be able to, and you begin to have to process what happened.
Yeah.
And that's not costless or easy. And obviously it falls heavier on some shoulders than others, but it's not trivial. And if this is sort of to be seen a bit as a trauma, and it's obviously not battle, but it's a trauma for folks, then the number of people who are traumatized, even the numbers who are severely traumatized, surely number in the many, many millions.
Oh, and that's just here in the United States.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, in the rest of the world, COVID is very much not a sort of thing people are exhaling with relief on, right? If you're sitting in Brazil or in India, or for that matter, Pakistan or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or any number of other places, or even Japan, wrestling with whether or not to have the Olympics, right? Like the COVID story is much more contemporary story.
And much more, and even more deadly. The global South, just generally speaking.
Well, the global South is also relying on the Serum Institute of India to produce their whatever vaccine they were likely to get, and India can't handle India and has now said, hey, sorry, guys, we're not going to be exporting anything until 2022. Right? And we're not even fully halfway yet. It's not June yet. So we're not even halfway through 2021, and folks are being told, like, we're not going to be able to deliver anything for 6 more months. And that means another winter for everybody waiting to be vaccinated. And as we know, fall and winter has tended to be tougher, whether that's the sort of global north fall and winter or global south fall winter. Fall winter has tended to be more problematic in the age of COVID than spring and summer.
And eviction trauma is about to kick in.
And what? What did you say?
Eviction trauma. Eviction trauma is going to happen.
We were going to we didn't get to that today, Dr. Wolf. I mean, and
it was also, I think, very different by state, right? So New York has extended through 2021 for the whole 2021. Okay. But I know there are other places where they've not, right? So I think there's also quite a differential kind of thing there by city and state. But yeah, for sure, that's going to have to be reckoned with, right? There's a lot of back rent, which frankly is probably never going to be paid. So we have to figure that out. And eviction processes, which will clog the courts possibly for years whenever the various moratoria roll off. And it's not just the renters either with eviction. I think there's also a fair amount of delinquent mortgage paper out there, where folks have put on suspension their mortgage repayments through the pandemic. So, I mean, I think, again, that's part of what I mean. That's ossifying the situation. It's locking people in place. So if there's a mismatch between where jobs and where people are, which there often is, all these housing issues, especially the more serious ones that you're mentioning, these housing issues make labor forces less flexible, less able to go to where the jobs are. And that leaves jobs unfilled, and it leaves people unemployed.
Well, we haven't even talked about the landlords. Just people who bought an investment property, and they are getting kicked in the teeth. I'm wondering.
Or live in a property and rent out.
Yeah,
or live in a property and rent out a room or two or apartment or two, or our Airbnb seems to have come back a bit. But yeah, I mean, there's all this gig economy stuff too, and those folks don't, they often don't have a great support economic social safety net. So they're whether the gig economy people were taken off unemployment in a lot of states, right? But there's a lot of people who make their living in combinations of doing sort of Instacart, Lyft, and Uber, and Airbnb, and all these kind of new gig economy type of jobs. And they, in many cases, have been left kind of high and dry. So, and I apologize. This is obviously an interesting conversation and perhaps an inopportune moment, but I have a 9:30, so I'm going to run.
Max, you're just a jewel. Thank you so much.
See you soon, Dr. Wolf.
Thanks. Always a pleasure, guys. Be well. Talk soon.
I'll call you later on today.
Bye.
Jonathan?
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jonathan.
babe.
Love you so much. I just sent you
Love
an
you, girl.
email. Check it
Talk
out.
to you soon. Okay, babe. Bye-bye.
I love you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the conversation today. I certainly did. What did you say? Brilliant people can be fun? Oh, boy, Daryl. These two guys crack me up, and they make me think, as do you. I love you, everybody. See you tomorrow. We'll be talking about Tulsa. Bye-bye.